After patch 2.4 and 2.5, with the release of Sunder Charms, the self-wield Infinity Nova Sorceress became popularized, with most build guides encouraging you to use Vipermagi and Chains of Honor as the best in slot armor choices. Now, while these might seem like the obvious cookie-cutter intuitive options, all of you were sleepwalking past a unorthodox and formidable theory-crafted alternative, and that is the Fortitude Nova Sorceress. Fortunately for us, a religious Nova player who originally incepted this back in 2.5 by the name of Saggy and Nova Lover has brought this to life, but it has since massively flown under the radar, and we are here to finally give this build the attention it deserves. For you hardcore enthusiasts out there, the Fortitude Nova Sorceress build is a godsend. With its unbreakable defense, this build is tailor-made to navigate the dangerous territories of hardcore mode. This might just be the key to your survival as you're powering through player 8 terrorized zones with speed and efficiency. Now, just for some quick housekeeping, Saggy already wrote a build guide back in patch 2.5 that is already publicly in the wild on wowhead.com, and I am going to have that linked below in the resources. He was also kind enough to actively update his max roll D2R planners, and there are two different links below, one with his endgame build and another with his mid-game progression. Sanctuary, I have a question for you. By a show of hands, how many of you can honestly admit and say that you remembered that faster cast rate was a affix on Fortitude? That's what I thought. There are so many underrated affixes that are tailor-made for the Nova Sorceress, and again, a huge shout out and kudos to Saggy for even thinking about this as a logical philosophical playbook for the Nova Sorceress, and he has been stress testing this with success over the last year and a half, proving that this can plow through player 8 terror zones on hardcore. Now, let's jump into the build a little bit. So what really ultimately electrifies the Fortitude framework is the level 15 chilling armor proc when struck. Now, the reason for this, and as you can see up on screen, as some of you may recall, that in patch 2.4, chilling armor was significantly buffed in comparison to shiver armor and frozen armor. Its base defense got a huge boost, and every incremental point thereafter input into it has a much larger defensive spread by margin and incrementality. So this, in conjunction with the 215% enhanced defense of the armor itself, just massively synergizes to lower the chance of melee and physical range attackers hitting you, which ultimately helps preserve your mana pool by reducing the frequency of energy shield activations from those sources. Now, we talked a little bit about the benefits to the mana pool, and this is really where I love the 12% damage taken goes to mana as a key attribute to converting portions of the physical damage taken to your life and offshooting that into your mana. And this serves as a sustainable mana regeneration element during combat, and it enables continuous spell casting and prolonged survival, which again may just give you that micro moment to actually teleport out of there or take an extremely harsh proc critical blow. Now, of course, as we think about the plus 30 resistances and the plus 5% to maximum lightning resistance, we know that elemental damages are going to lower your mana pool and it will pass through, and so having high resistances are what ultimately mitigate and reduce the high impacted damage thereafter, and especially the plus 5% to maximum lightning resistance is huge against souls. So ultimately, at the end of the day, there really are not a lot of negatives and cons to this. Obviously, it does require low rune. It is a little bit more expensive than Vipermagi. But what really ultimately sets this build apart is the fact that it enables you to, again, absorb the harshest of blows from dolls, from cows, from archers, from those heavy, heavy melee impacts. And this is just not something that you're going to see on a more squishy Vipermagi setup. And this is really what made me fall in love with Saggy's build, and ultimately why he continues to play this even moving forward into patch 2.8. So you may be wondering, how does Saggy's underrated framework compare against the conventional Vipermagi build? So let's unpack that a little bit. So the first major thing to really ultimately call out is the defense. So what you're looking at here is chilling armor is procced, and so his build starts with a base 6k defense. Now, he does use a Defiance Mercenary because he plays in hardcore, and that's just his personal choice. So when Defiance kicks in, this will go up to just short of about 12k defense, which again really boosts your survivability and gameplay experience. Now, for context, when you actually go with the Vipermagi build, and let's assume that you have frozen armor as your casting defense, on the average, you're looking around 3K defense. That is a significant difference going from a squishy 3K all the way up to 6. Now, yes, obviously you have energy shield that does help with absorbing some of the blows, but in the event, if you got your mana drained and smacked with souls, you are going to be extremely squishy, and your chance of survivability wearing a Vipermagi is much more limiting at 3K defense versus 6. Now, what's interesting is that both builds of the Vipermagi and Saggies are generally based off of the 105 faster cast rate build. Now, one thing I wanted to show is that he also likes to wear T-Gods. I called that out briefly in the prior segment. It's mainly because A, it provides strength and vitality, the strength to help him on the great hauberk armor and equipping. But he gets the plus 10% maximum lightning resistance to help with souls and the plus 20 lightning absorb. So ultimately what this is leading him to is 90% lightning resistance because of the combination of Fortitude and T-Gods. When you think about Vipermagi, and again, the general builds, you're going to be at your 75%. You're not getting any additive buffing against souls. You're not getting any lightning absorb necessarily. So this is a major benefit of, again, rocking with his framework versus the conventional Vipermagi. Now, some of you may be thinking, what about the Nova damage? You're losing the plus skill point on Viper, the plus skill point on the Arachnid Mesh. Maybe you're wearing Soges, again, because we're talking about an end game build. While it may seem that way on the surface, I can assure you that is the furthest thing from the truth. This thing plows with significant speed and efficiency through player 8 terror zones and is truly unmatched and can absolutely compete with the same clear speed of Vipermagi, and we are going to show some gameplay experiences coming up. And the last thing I wanted to call out is that how he gets to 105%, and you can see that in his build guides linked below in the resources, is that while trading off the Iraq and losing 5% on the armor, he of course goes with the 10 FCR rings and a 215 Ami and wearing Griffin. So you will need a 215 Ami at minimum in order to hit this breakpoint based off of his build. But again, I have loved having an experience playing this with his game files, and I encourage you to definitely check it out. Now, as I mentioned, he does have his actual builds linked below in the resources on Maxroll. I just want to call out again that this is just a single player file. It is not his exact build, but it puts us kind of in the framework of what he typically plays. So let's quickly just go and look at the skill breakdown. Unsurprisingly, this is a Nova build, so he's maxing Nova and the static synergy. For DPS, he of course is maxing Lightning Mastery. And because you're going with energy shield, you of course would maximize telekinesis. I do want to call out that while some people do maximize energy shield, sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. You actually do have the ability to possibly move the points down and getting this to around 70% absorb. And what that ultimately would do is allow you to actually maximize warmth as a trade-off, which helps you with your mana upkeep and regeneration. So as you are taking those blows, you can regenerate faster. The one drawback of having high energy shield is that because the Fortitude Nova Sorceress isn't using a rack, which increases your mana pool, or SOJs, for example, your general mana pool is going to be down. And as a trade-off, you do have higher vitality, especially in hardcore mode. And so with your lower mana, you are going to take more aggressive blows. And so the mana regeneration and upkeep is something very critical you have to pay attention to. I at least just wanted to briefly call that out. Now, as we look at his Mercenary, he is going with the Insight, Cure, and Chains of Honor stack. Obviously, Cure for the cleansing aura to mitigate poison. These obviously were very popular after these rolled out in the new Rune Word patches. And I mentioned that he uses Defiance. So again, what you're looking at here in hardcore is this elevates his defense to about 12k when you have the Defiance Merc, which majorly helps you from mitigating and avoiding hits. So I would say for softcore builds out there, the other option, as we know, is if you wanted, you could go with the tri-stack of Insight, Prayer, Merc, and Cleansing, because there is a passive connection between Prayer and Insight. It gives you replenish life ticks back to you as the sorceress. So again, either or, you can still rock the Fortitude build and go that Mercenary setup, or you can follow his with the Defiance. Either or are very effective, but I just wanted to quickly call that out. So overall, again, this is a great build. Just as a reminder, go follow his builds on Maxroll if you want to get more specific with his frameworks, as these are just example single player files. But now let's actually showcase how quickly that this girl can actually fly and clear even the harshest of zones. And there you have it, fellow Nephilim. The Fortitude Nova Sorceress is a breath of fresh air to the Lightning Sorceress archetype. This build redefines the meta and proves that even an unorthodox framework can yield incredible results. Whether you're looking for lightning power destruction or hardcore resilience, you may just find the Fortitude Nova Sorceress is your next adventure in Diablo 2 Resurrected. Stay frosty, Sanctuary.